So, okay, we know that there's a lot of oil in the Middle East, okay? But you know, oil is not as rare as people think it is. There's also a lot of oil in Canada. Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves, okay? Russia also has a lot of oil. So in other words, if the Strait of Hormuz is closed, if this war in the GCC continues, it doesn't mean the world no longer has oil. All it means is the world is now much more dependent on North America and Russia for oil. And so the global economy now shifts over to North America and to Russia. Okay? So in other words, the United States starts a stupid war in the GCC in the Middle East. It can't possibly win, but it still benefits because now the world is much more dependent on North America. Okay? Why is Venezuela important? Because America just took over Venezuela in January. Okay? And look, Canada has a lot of oil, and Trump is threatening to take over Canada. Okay? So now let's look at who needs the oil. Well, this map tells you that if you're in the red, you consume more oil than you export. And who are these countries? Well, they're Europe, okay? And they are East Asia, as well as Australia. Okay? So, yes, I understand Donald Trump's an idiot. Yes, I understand that he's going to lose this war in the Middle East. Yes, I understand he's going to destroy the global economy. But for some strange reason, he benefits. And the United States benefits. Because now, Europe and China, Japan, Australia, they are much more dependent on North America for resources, for food, for energy. Okay? All right, food. Okay, so nitrogen is important for fertilizers. Okay, you need nitrogen for fertilizers. And as you can, and what this map tells you is that if you are in the blue or the light blue, it means you produce more nitrogen than you need, so you export it. If you are not in the blue, then you're kind of screwed, okay? So basically, this area especially, this area, okay? Europe, as some parts of Europe, okay? So now they need more nitrogen. And again, before they were getting a lot of nitrogen, ammonia, from the Middle East. And now, where are they forced to get the nitrogen? From here and from here. Okay? So again, yes, I know Donald Trump's losing this war in the Middle East, but in the long term, America stands to benefit. Right. Last thing I want to look at is water. Okay? Water is important because water tells us which areas are the most stable. Basically, if you have a lot of water, you're less prone to conflict. But if you don't have that much water, then you're prone to conflict, okay? So we look at, so if you're in a dark blue, you're good, okay? Nothing to worry about. If you are in the light blue, you are in a lot of trouble, okay? So if we look at this area, North America, pretty stable because lots and lots of fresh water, okay? If you look at Russia, pretty stable, lots and lots of fresh water. But if you're Africa, you're in a lot of trouble. If you're Europe, you're in a lot of trouble. If you are Middle East, you're in a lot of trouble. If you are Southeast Asia, you are not in that much trouble, but you are in some trouble, okay? So we already see how this map tells us where in the future, basically Russia and the United States, North America, are the most stable parts of the world with the most resources. And therefore, they are the most resilient, the most stable, okay? But if you go to Africa, Europe, Middle East, Southeast Asia, these are points of conflict in the world. So we can expect these places to become much more unstable over time. So in other words, all the United States and Russia have to do is maintain stability and then export resources to these places. And guess what? And then they make a lot of money for themselves. Okay? So again, I understand Donald Trump's an idiot. I understand this war in the Middle East is stupid, but from a long-term game theory perspective, the United States wins from this disaster, from a long-term perspective, okay? Now, you look at this map, you think, well, China's pretty good too, right? Like China has a lot of fresh water. The problem with China, though, is this. China sits on a lot of fresh water that Southeast Asia and India depends on, okay? So a lot of water is in the Tibetan Plateau, and it flows downstream into India and in Southeast Asia. If there were a drought, using game theory, we can suspect that China might want to keep the water for itself, right? In which case, Southeast Asia and India would be very angry, okay? So this is a potential flashpoint that we have to watch out for. Okay? So it seems like China is stable, but the surrounding areas are not so stable. And so China will be dragged into a conflict. Okay? All right. So let's summarize what we've learned so far. So these are the countries with the most oil reserves, okay? Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Canada, Iraq, UAE, Kuwait, United States, Russia. Okay. All right. Now what's interesting about this is this. This war in the Middle East is going to knock out the oil production of Saudi Arabia, of Iran, of Iraq, of UAE, of Kuwait. Which leaves what? Which leaves, Venezuela, Canada, and the United States, okay? North America, and Russia. Okay? Now, then let's look at who has to buy oil. All right? Let's look at who buys oil. Well, the United States consumes a lot of oil, but again, it has its own supply of oil. China needs to import a lot of its oil needs, okay? So China imports about 75% of its oil needs. India, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Japan, South Korea, okay? Germany. All right, so China, India, Japan, South Korea imports a lot of oil. And where does it get its oil from? The Middle East, right? So if it can't get its oil from the Middle East, then these four countries, China, India, Japan, and South Korea, will need to get the oil either from the United States or Russia. Okay? And why does this matter? Well, let's look at this. Let's look at who owns the most U.S. treasuries. Basically, if you own a lot of U.S. treasuries, it means that you are financing American debt. America right now is $39 trillion in debt. That's a lot of money, but as long as people continue to buy U.S. debt, as long as people want to buy U.S. treasuries, it's not a problem, okay? It's a Ponzi scheme. Okay. So let's look at this. Who are the biggest holders of U.S. debt? Japan, China, right? Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, India. Okay, so this is all Asia. And we already said that Asia needs a lot of oil from the Middle East, right? Now let's look at others. United Kingdom is second, okay? Cayman Islands is basically just Europe as well. It's a money laundering operation, okay? Belgium, Luxembourg, Canada, France, Ireland, Switzerland. These countries are Europe. And again, where do we say most oil from the GCC go? It goes to either Asia or Europe. And now, because of the stupid war in the Middle East, Asia and Europe are now forced to buy oil from either Russia or the United States. And this is important, okay? This is important because previously, there's a fear that these countries would stop buying US Treasuries because America is too heavily in debt. The American economy is too much of a Ponzi scheme. So there's this great fear that Europe and Asia would move away from the US dollar and more towards Swiss francs or gold, okay? Now, because Europe and Asia need fertilizer, they need energy from the United States and North America, the United States no longer has to worry about its debt, okay? All right, the $39 trillion debt, not a problem because the entire world is dependent on North America for resources. The Ponzi scheme can keep on going. So again, Donald Trump is an idiot, but he's so stupid, he's become a genius.